Hi guys, greetings from Bulgaria. I'm Anton. Thank you for having me on your conference, and let me share my screen. Before we begin, I just want to say that I'm honored to be part of the conference, and I want you to know that people in Bulgaria, the smart people here, stand by Ukraine, and I hope that you will prevail, and soon all of this to be over. So, in the talk, I'm going to talk about custom web components that use Shadow DOM and why we need such web components. Of course, I'm not a really big fan of slides, so I'm going to most of the time discuss code examples and show you practical stuff. Before we begin, who am I? I'm Anton Angelov. I'm CTO and co-founder of Automated Planet. Maybe some of you know me from my blog and many articles there, or you have one of my books about design patterns in automated testing, or you watch me on one of the many conferences I talked. In the talk, I'm going to explain what is the Shadow DOM, what are these new web components, why you need them, how they work. Be aware that it will be a rather technical talk, and we're going to discuss many examples of HTML and JavaScript, but don't worry. I believe that we, as modern software developers in test or automation QAs, we need to understand how these internals work in order to be able to do our job. And nowadays, more and more, we need to understand the technical stuff so that we can, automate the modern websites. And then, of course, at the end of the talk, I'm going to discuss how we can automate such custom web components after we know how they work. I'm going to use Java with Selenium, but you can use any language of your preference, or you can do it with just plain JavaScript. If we have time, I'm going to show you some examples from my work where we had to automate some custom, rather really complex React components using Shadow DOM in cases where we cannot interact with the internals of the control. I'm going to show you how we can use JavaScript to help us do that. So let's begin. The first place, by the way, this talk is based on one of the many videos that I recorded for the Lambda test video channel. You can find a really detailed video about it on their YouTube channel. And also you can download the full source code there. So check it out. So the first place to learn about Shadow DOM is to visit the MDN Web Docs. This is the website of Mozilla Web Docs, the developers of Firefox web browser. It's maybe one of the greatest places to learn about the HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And luckily for you, there are three articles here about custom web components, Shadow DOM, and using templates as slots. Check them out. In order to show you more examples how this works, if we see, for example, even here, we can find, for example, this video player. I created this dummy web page. If we open the DevTools here, I use Edge, but it's the same in Firefox and Chrome. You'll see that I enabled here for you to see the Shadow DOM. In a minute, I'm going to define what is this, but basically you're familiar with popular HTML5 custom web tags like video, input color, input date. All of them are using Shadow DOM. In order to see the Shadow DOM, you can go here to the settings, and you need to check this checkbox here, show user agent Shadow DOM. This is like the internal structure of this web component. So what is actually the shuttle DOM? This is this thing here. When you enable it, you're going to see it. You can expand it. You're going to see this hidden DOM inside the DOM. So Shadow DOM is connected to the process of creating your own custom web components, like this video player, or for example, I don't know, text editor that probably I'm going to show you in the end of the presentation. And we need these custom web components like the video player, so that you, for example, if you want to use this video player in another page, so that you don't need to repeat all this markup with divs, spans, inputs, etc. Because this is a really complex control, right? You have many buttons, sliders, etc. So, but it's not just about reusing the markup. Like, it's the same way why we use page objects, right? To reuse the code. It's the same with this Shadow DOM. But the reason for using Shadow DOM is for every web component to have a real good encapsulation. We keep the component styles and the JavaScript logic in a separate place. And we have the option to hide the internals by marking the Shadow DOM mode to close. This is closed Shadow DOM. This means that as we will discuss during the talk, you cannot interact with web components internals if this Shadow DOM is closed. It's closed when it says here user agent. If it's open, you can interact with JavaScript with it. We can interact with it with WebDriver. It should say here open, as we'll see in other examples. So yeah, basically the Shadow DOM API is key part of this, providing ways to attach a hidden separate DOM to an element here. Note that the Shadow DOM is not a new thing by any means. Browsers have used it for a long time to encapsulate the inner structure of elements. As I said, think of this example for the video player or the data pickers that you use in HTML5 or co-op picker. All you see here is if you haven't enabled the Shadow DOM in the settings, you're going just to see the video tag, the video element. But when you enable it, you're going to see the internal structure. So let's clear some terminology here. First, we have two words, shadow host and shadow root. As you can see, this is the shadow root. The shadow host is the regular DOM node or element that the Shadow DOM is attached to. In our case, this is the video tag. And the shadow root, this is the root node of the shadow tree. This is the shadow root. So you can affect the nodes in the Shadow DOM in exactly the same way as non-shadow shadow nodes. For example, we can append children, we can set attributes, we can style individual nodes. For example, using element.style.something, or we can add styles to the entire Shadow DOM tree inside style elements. And the difference is that none of the code inside the Shadow DOM can affect anything outside of it. And this way we have a handy encapsulation, right? So let's see some examples. For my examples, as I said, you can clone the repo from the video that you can find on the Lambda test channel. Not this one, but here it is. Shadow DOM automation. You can find it on GitHub. In the resources folder, I built first two files here, index.html and index.css. Let me show you the examples. I used here for the demo a popular web framework called Bootstrap. Bootstrap helps us to style the pages, gives you a lot of functionality out of the box. So using Bootstrap, I created this web form. This is like a popular web form for when you want to sign up for a webinar, right? And we usually put here names, email addresses, passwords, accept button, etc. I just modified a little bit the custom example of Bootstrap to make it work. It has also required validations. You need to accept here the terms of use in the policy and all that. If we inspect that, or directly I can show you the HTML code. It's just a regular web page where we first had we have the head part where we link different style sheets for Google Fonts, for the Bootstrap and Font Awesome, for jQuery, which is a popular JavaScript library for giving a lot of flexibility. And I'm linking here my custom style sheet, which is this index CSS, which gives you the how the form looks like. What else? Inside the body, we have a div with the sign up form. We have the heading. This is the title, and we have a form, which is triggered when we click the register button. What else? We have the username. Basically, we have many pairs of labels and inputs. And yeah, at the end, you have this label with the required where we have this anchor with the privacy policy. But basically, you need to check the terms of use that you accepted. And then we have a button which basically triggers the form and submit it to the server. Basically, that's it. That's the form. However, as I said, in many cases, you don't need to repeat all of this every time. Imagine that many companies nowadays, they create these webinars, and we have a dedicated page for every webinar that we collect leads. Leads mean email addresses so that our sales team can contact these people later and offer our services to these future clients or potential clients. But every time when we have such a webinar, we need to change the title, maybe this title as well. We want to change the terms of use and privacy policy, maybe the text here inside the button, maybe we want to change the colors of the form. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of changes, but we want to reuse the markup. Otherwise, IDs will be different, classes will be different. It will be hard to maintain over time. So this is why I built two other forms, like reusing the markup, but this time we have a form for Christmas, where we have this red color, we have different title, we have different links, and we have a different text of the button here. And we have almost the same form, but again, different title, different color, different name of the button, different links. As you can imagine, they're relatively similar, but we have these slight changes. In order to reuse, all of the markup, I rewrote the form into a custom web component. Let me inspect here this thing. I will close the shadow root. As you can see here, like the video player, we have now a custom web component called, or a web tag called unique signup form. And as you can see, we are providing this type of customizations that I explained through custom attributes. For example, we are setting the name of the button here through this custom attribute button name. We set the terms, the policy, the title, and the color. That's all. And everything else of the markup is inside this shadow root. As you can see, the whole markup. So basically, in the head, we don't need any more every time to place these style sheets if you are not using them outside of this component, or we can use something else. And I did the same for this particular control. If we close here the shadow root, you will notice that I just changed here the values here of the custom attributes. So let's discuss how this works, and let's see how to use the Shadow DOM to build such components. In the resources folder of the GitHub repo, we're going to see two forms. The Christmas form here first. We're going to discuss a little bit later another way how you can customize these custom web components using Shadow DOM. We're going to use templates and slots. Again, there is a really great article on the MDN website. But as you can see here, by the way, I haven't cleaned it up, but basically I can delete all of that here. We don't need it because we have it in the Shadow DOM, right? So you don't need it. I'll just leave it like this. But the main thing that we need, is in order to be able to use this tag here, is that you need to reference this signup form component.js. It contains our custom web components that defines it in this JavaScript file to use Shadow DOM. So let's see how this signup form component.js is working. And by the way, this New Year's form is the same thing, is the same unique signup form, but we provided here different attributes. That's all. I just changed the color, the title, and the buttons. And now, here is the important part. We have, in order to build such custom web component, we need to define a regular JavaScript class. It extends from this base class HTML element, and basically, you have some of the web components that are custom web components that are standalone. They don't inherit from standard HTML elements. You use this on a page by literally writing them out as an HTML element. For example, pop-up info, or we can use document create element pop-up info. That's fine. But when you build customized built-in elements, they need to inherit from these basic HTML elements. In our case, this HTML element. So they have a few important methods here that you can basically define. The first one is the constructor, and this method will be, as in other languages, it will be called when this custom tag element gets created. So this is the first place where we attach the Shadow DOM using this attach Shadow DOM, and we here specify the mode. As I said, it's really important if you need to be able to interact with it with WebDriver to set it to open. Many often when you work in your test environments, you can ask your front-end developers to make it open, and maybe later if clients are using the library, maybe you need to mark it as closed for production. It's up to you what will be the approach. Then we have this method that contains the main logic. It's called connected callback. This connected callback is called when the custom tag elements get inserted into the document. We have a similar method for when the custom tag element gets deleted from the document. This is called disconnected callback. And we have one more. It's called attribute change callback. As you can guess from the name, it's called when an attribute in the custom tag element was added, removed, or updated, and you can access the attribute name, the old value, the new value, right? So let's, and one more thing before discussing the connected callback, it's really important about this registration here. As you can see, we use these define methods, and we provide here, we specify first the the tag name that we are going to use in the markup to use this element, we provide the class as a second parameter. In the controller of all of the custom elements on a web document is this custom element registry object, these custom elements. This object allows you to register custom elements on the web page. It returns information on what custom elements are registered, etc. And to register a custom element, as I said, you need to call the define method. And it takes these two arguments, the tag name that we are going to use in the markup, and we provide here the name of the class. After that, you will be surprised how simple it is to create such custom web components. Basically, there are two ways. First, we're going to see maybe slightly easier way to define these custom web elements. First, in the connected callback, again, this method will be called when this custom tag element gets inserted into the document. So the first thing that we do is that we want to get different attributes in their values, right? We want to get the custom title, the terms of use, the privacy policy, the button name, and the color. After that, let me quickly remind you. After that, we need to, provide all the styles. Here we need all the styles. Then we want to add the markup, the inner markup, but we want to apply all the customizations that we have in these custom attributes. So we first get the values of the attributes. Then we use, basically we define the CSS as a string, and we use the special JavaScript syntax called string interpolation. We have it in C#, we have it in other languages, but basically it allows you, when you define such a string, such a text, we can use this syntax with $ curly brackets just to apply the value from this particular variable here. Basically, if this is color red, in the string it will be replaced with red, right? Basically, the compiler will just replace this placeholder with the actual value. And we do that to customize the CSS based on the custom color that we provided in the attribute as a string. And then when we have the shadow root, again, we have the shadow root because we attach here the shadow DOM. So you need to be sure that you attach the shadow DOM first. And then when we have the shadow root, this is again the main node of the shadow DOM. We set its inner HTML as text. As you can see here, we again use string interpolation. Basically, I copy-pasted the whole markup here, but I modified a few parts based on basically I added the custom CSS that we defined here, and I changed the title, I changed the button name, and applied here the terms of use and the privacy policy that we got. That's all. Basically, we defined all of the CSS and the inner HTML as text, and we just attach them to the shadow root. After that, we can use the custom web component. As simple as that. Nothing really special. However, be aware that if you use this approach with the string interpolation, the problem is that if you make some typo mistakes in the HTML or in the CSS, basically the IDE won't help you really. So you need to be careful, and there is actually even better approach how to handle this. It's called HTML templates, and let me show you what this is. The HTML template, here we have another file, New Year's form template. It's almost the same thing, the same form. Basically, we use the same tag here because I referenced, we can delete all these lines. But yeah, basically you have the sign up form component JS here referenced. As you can see here, I have a second version of my custom web component that it's using HTML templates. So what is the template? As you can see here, we defined it in the head, and actually it contains the whole markup. It's, you know, it contains the whole markup, and but what it is, when you have to reuse the same markup structures repeatedly on a web page, it makes sense to use some kind of a template rather than repeating the same structure over and over again or using it as a string. And this was possible before, but it is made a lot easier by this HTML template element, which is, by the way, well supported in modern browsers. This element and its content, be aware, are not rendered in the DOM, but it can be still referenced using JavaScript. And this is exactly what we do here in our second version of the sign-up form component. Please note that here now in the constructor, I'm not attaching the shadow DOM. I'm doing it a little bit later. In the connected callback, I'm getting again all of the attributes. But now first, I'm getting the template by I get it by using ID, using the standard get element by ID method, and the template has this content property. Through the template, basically through the content property, I can access the inner HTML. After that, I'm attaching the shadow DOM and I'm marking it as open. And after that, in order to reuse the content of the template, as we discussed before, we can do anything that we do in normal DOM. I'm appending a child. Basically, I'm adding this inner template HTML by cloning its content, and I'm appending it to the shadow DOM. And after that, in order to customize, the header, the button, the title, the privacy policy, and the terms of use, I'm just getting these elements by ID, and I set their text content or links to the ones that I got from the custom attributes. When we want to modify the CSS, the way we do it is, again, I use string interpolation, but I use this special class called CSS style sheet, where it holds the current styles of the DOM. And then we have this replace sync method, where I can change only the parts that I need to modify. In our case, I'm overriding this here. And then I'm basically use this adopted style sheets to apply the changes. After that, everything stays the same. So this is another approach how you can modify that. And lastly, as I said, we have another way to, if we look into the custom components, we have, let me see, yeah, here we use slots. What are the slots? Basically, this, instead of using attributes to provide the data, we replaced some of the internal tags of our custom web components with the markups here, but not here that we use this slot attribute. It's built-in HTML attribute, and let me show you where you can read about it. The slot is like a placeholder that we're going to replace with the tag that we specified inside the element. It really depends on what you want to achieve. Here you need to open this article using templates and slots. Here is the flexibility with slots. And inside the custom web component, we can define this SWOT element. And by providing its name later inside the SWOT attribute, our custom element with the SWOT attribute will replace the whole markup here, which is excellent for more complex web components. It really depends on what you want to achieve. Now, let's discuss how we can automate these forms. I will start first by automating the regular form. It's just we are going to use regular. Most of the time, I'm going to use XPath, right? We just need to fill the form, check the checkbox, and click sign up button. To do the job, I use standard Java Maven Selenium setup with JUnit. If you're not familiar how to do that, again, on the Lambda test channel, I recorded many different videos regarding JUnit, going into much more details how to make the setup. I usually use IntelliJ. Maybe I can show you here. So inside the POM XML, we usually specify the different dependencies. I installed all of the required dependencies for JUnit. I installed all of the required dependencies for Selenium and WebDriver Manager. That's all. Also, all of the different files that I showed you, they're part of the resources folder here in the Shadow DOM. And next, under tests, Shadow DOM Java, here are all of my tests. So here in maybe I prefer the coloring here. So here we before the tests we are using WebDriver Manager to download the proper version of the driver. Then before each of the tests, we're starting the Chrome browser. We are maximized it, and then after that we're closing it, standard stuff. And then the first test that you're going to see is actually automating the non-Shadow DOM version of the form. Be aware that here we have a little bit more complex syntax at the beginning to open the specific page, because it's not really a page because I haven't caused it anywhere, but we are loading it from a file. This is why in order to load the HTML file, I get it from the resources of the class, and then we use getPath to build the URI, and then we navigate to it. But in most cases, you're going just to navigate to your particular web page. I'm just limited to my demos here so that people that clone the GitHub repo can start directly using it. After that, we have standard WebDriver code where we just find elements by tag, by XPath. Then in order to validate stuff, I'm using regular JUnit assertions. To get the heading, I use heading get text. Please note that in order to check and assert the color, the way you can do that is when you expect the element here from the right panel, you can click computed. And as you can see, you see here all of the CSS properties. And we're interested in this background color. And WebDriver, when you find an element, you have a method called getCSSValue. You need to specify here this title here, background/color, and you can get the value. In our case, this is RGB something. So this is the way how I assert the color of the button. You can check whatever CSS value you want. And then I assert the text inside the button. I use send keys to type into the form. That's all. Now let's discuss how we can achieve that. But when we when we use Shadow DOM, again, we just navigate to the correct page. We locate. In our case, I'm locating the custom tag, the custom form, using the unique signup form tag because I defined it. Then the most important part here is that we need, as you can guess, as I explained, shadow host is called the element that the shadow DOM is attached to. So in my case, this is why I named it shadow host. And in WebDriver, we have this get shadow root method. it will basically give you the access to the shadow root. Be careful. If the shadow DOM is closed, if you see this user agent, then at this particular line here, you're going to receive shadow root not found exception or something like that. So yeah, in this case, you won't be able to automate it with WebDriver. However, I'm going to show you, explain how we can do that with the web plan, with the video plan. Before WebDriver 4, because from Selenium version 4.0, we have this get shadow root. Before that, you could also work with the shadow DOM, but we had to use this syntax here: driver, execute script, return arguments from 0, shadow root. So we needed to use JavaScript to test it. Also be aware that when the same way when we search, for example, in a HTML table, when we search inside of it for other elements like rows or cells, when you use XPath always, when you use two slashes, no matter whether you use find elements or find element, it's always going to search inside the whole web page. So when we use find elements, and not find elements, sorry, but when you search in another element like this, if you use this syntax, it will again not search in the element, but in the whole page. If you want to use the XPath to search just in this element, you need to provide here dot. However, most of the time, this is not working when you work with Shadow DOM. I noticed that actually, in order this to work, you need to use mainly CSS. At least for this demo, this was the case. If you're not familiar, I prefer usually to use XPath. Of course, I can write CSS as well. One easy way, by the way, there was a talk on the conference about ChatGPT. I'm really curious about it. Nikolai will talk about it. But I'm using ChatGPT from time to time, and it's especially useful for here. Look what I typed. I typed, please write it related to CSS selector. I provided the XPath locators, and it really quickly rewrote my whole code to use CSS selectors, which is excellent, right? Of course, be aware that many often, especially if you use really complex SPAC selectors with XPath access, whatever, this won't work. You cannot use CSS for that. However, for some simple stuff, this works really well. So I wrote it to use CSS selectors. After that, everything stays the same. Just be aware that now, instead of searching here in the whole page using the driver, I'm searching inside the shadow root. This is really important. Basically, you're searching inside another DOM, right? The other test is the same. I'm just loading another page. Another thing that I wanted to show you is actually a case when you have nested shadow DOMs. And actually, in my practice nowadays, especially when you're automating React web pages, even a week ago, I had to automate a really complex React web page where it had 7 nested shadow DOMs. You can imagine how complex this is, but it was relatively fast. So the only thing to be aware of, let me show you how this works. Again, we load the web page, we find the first shadow host, we get its shadow root. In order to work with the nested shadow root, we just need to find the second shadow host, and then we need to call its get shadow root. And you can do as many times as you want, it will work. Nothing really special, just you need to be aware that you need every time to say get shadow root, and search inside the root. And now, before we wrap up, I wanted to show you the video player. And if we clean it, if you check here, as I said, watch here the difference. Here, when in our case, the shadow root here says open. But when we try to automate this user agent, this is true for all of the standard HTML5 controls. This is closed shadow DOM. You won't be able to automate it with WebDriver with the way that I showed you. So you're going to receive the exception I explained, shadow DOM not found. However, luckily for us, for most of the cases, we can use JavaScript to automate such web controls. Not all of them provide such handy JavaScript methods, but when they do, you can use it in your WebDriver tests. So let me show you in the console. In order to access the video player, we just find it by ID. And then the video player actually give us a few methods. Like video player, you can search like this. We can play the video. We can pause it. We can increase the time. For example, if I return to the beginning, I increased here the timeline. I can increase the volume like this. I can enable even full screen. And there are many more methods, right? So many often when instead of interacting with the shadow DOM, when you get an instance of the element, we can interact with the JavaScript API. And in the tests, if I need to show you that, here I implemented a simple implementation of this video player. So the important part here is that we locate normally the video player tag, right, by tag name. As I said, if you check this shadow root, if you call this shadow root, you will receive an exception. However, you can use driver.execute script to execute JavaScript. And when you pass as a first argument the actual web element, you can access the element using argument 0. This is the first argument. The second argument will be, you can provide here as many arguments as you want. You just need to, you can access them using this array here of arguments, just like with regular arrays in JavaScript, and you can call the different methods. And this way you can build an API, a library around the control using JavaScript, and you can play with it. So many often when we need to automate such complex controls, we do exactly that. For example, recently I had to automate, for example, a data picker like this. This data picker is a JavaScript control. Again, I use JavaScript to do it. Again, in another complex React website, our clients use this CK editor 5, which is a really complex text editor as Word or as WordPress, and it actually provides a really handy JavaScript methods that are not so well documented in this documentation in particular, but you can use ChatGPT to ask it. And I don't know from where, but it knows how actually you can interact with this with JavaScript, and then you can create this type of wrapper inside Java, C# or any language you use to create a custom web component that you can use in WebDriver to automate all of your scenarios. I hope that this talk was useful to you. As I said, I believe that as modern test automation engineers, we need to understand how everything works in order to be able to automate such complex scenarios. Yeah, you can check many of my videos on the Land Test channel or visit Automate the Planet book. and I will be happy to answer some of your questions. Thank you.